What do you get when you mix a Mochi and a Tiger? And a Golem? And Suezo and Hair? That's right, you get this guy. Now this guy's pretty strong. I know it doesn't look like it, but he is. He's got a guts rate of 1, all of the techs. That's not right. This thing should not exist, and it doesn't. Not really anyway. Okay, like, technically it does, because you're looking at it. It's like the opposite of a legend. It's a thing that no one knew about that is in fact alive and well. Or, alive at least. There's no mythos around this guy despite its immeasurable power. He's like an old one that lives deeper in the recesses than any other. He has no worshippers. He has no wants nor needs. He just exists, lurking on the peripheries of consciousness and game code. He's the Invalid. You can summon this little guy and a slew of other guys of varying littleness by forcing a combination in GameShark or Cheat Engine that doesn't exist otherwise. The only real restriction is that the main breed monsters cannot have mixed breeds with different models or varying body parts that would overlap. Mochi works, for example, because even though Draco Mochi has wings and Fig Penguin has a horn, no other Mochi has a horn and wings that differ from these two. All Mochis are actually programmed to spawn with wings and a horn like these guys are, they're just masked with transparency.
Through the Invalid, the truth becomes clear. Mochi once hidden to the non-believers now open to your mind's eye.
Arrowhead cannot spawn an Invalid since Renocraft, Priox, and Base Arrowhead all have drastically different body parts. The game doesn't know how to deal with this big dork's head and this cool lobster's head at the same time, and the game crashes because of it. Invalids are equal parts very cool and supremely messed up. They'll be wrapped in a texture map of the last monster's skin spawned into the game, which is very cool, but they'll be wrapped in the texture map of the last monster skin spawned into the game, which is supremely messed up. So that's what you get when you mix Mochi, Tiger, Golem, Hair, and Suezo. Unless you're watching the anime, in which case you get the opposite of a legend. Phoenix is the big MacGuffin in the anime. Its power is what the heroes work towards unleashing from episode 1. Rarely does canonical anime strength carry over into video game power level, and there's a good reason. The game has to be fun. Especially given how early you can find Phoenix, it'd be a bit absurd to be able to have an actual god on your ranch just a few hours in. But Phoenix is very powerful, it's just that its power is locked behind a few bizarre restrictions. Phoenix is a magical chicken and does not do well to attack physically. That's not really hard to understand though. If you've got the ability to summon fire from thin air, you probably aren't going to spend time scratching your opponents. Phoenix boasts maximum intelligence gains and minimum power gains with average stats otherwise. A slightly below average 14 guts rate doesn't do much to hurt it intrinsically, but since it can't be mixed with any other monsters, this means it doesn't get the chance to pull up its guts rate like other monsters do. Golem and Dragon, despite 18 and 19 guts rates respectively, can both mix with Metal Nerd and end up with a higher maximum guts regen rate than Phoenix does. In fact, every monster does. The only monster in the game with a guts rate as slow as Phoenix at absolute max is Arrowhead, and since Purebred Arrowhead starts with 17, this is much more of an indictment of Phoenix than it is of him. So, obviously this is not very good. But to the great credit of the game devs and designers, Phoenix's techs were balanced with this in mind. I'm going to mix things up a bit here. Phoenix is known for its intelligence, so I'm going to start with those techs instead. This way you don't have to skip ahead while I explain fringe uses of its basics. You're welcome. Fire Twister's numbers aren't very good, but the super fast animation time makes it pretty solid, and a consistent damage option to swing a bunch of times in a row. The chance to crit is pretty low given it's a sharp tech, and it doesn't wither much either, but 20 guts is a justifiable cost for Twister. This ends up being Phoenix's least risky damage option on the intelligence side, even at -4 hit, and it makes do as his main source of cheap damage. Fire Tornado bumps up everything except accuracy for a higher cost. Still very quick on a miss, Fire Tornado's 26 cost is okay given everything. The -10 hit makes this a little bit rough to use consistently, but 42% chance to crit at max pumps up the potential damage by a considerable clip. Though making Phoenix bad-natured to take advantage of this is a bit of an ordeal. We'll get into that later. Flame Shot is a withering tech on a monster with a bad guts rate, so it's kind of wild how impactful it can actually be. Normally we don't talk about withering techs being impactful outside of niche situations, but Flame Shot might be the best all-purpose withering tech in the game. But Phoenix having the worst maximum guts regen in the game and it sharing a slot with Fire Twister means you've got some decisions to make. Is this really what you want to be spending your guts on? I mean, maybe it is. It's a good option. But you're giving up a lot of potential damage to try and play a lockout game. If this was in a different slot, it would probably be a guaranteed pickup on every single Intelligence Phoenix build, but its placement covering up another tech Phoenix wants to be swinging often means it's not a sure thing. Bad-natured Phoenix is kinda hard to navigate. It starts with such a high base nature that without combining with a bad-natured monster, you'll have a hard time, if not an impossible time, getting to the depths of nature, since you can only raise or lower a monster's nature by 100 in either direction. In Monster Farm 2, the Japanese version of the game, it was not actually possible to get Flame Cannon, as it has a nature requirement of -50, meaning the absolute highest base nature you could start with and still lower it enough is +50. Phoenix has +90. In Monster Rancher 2, the Western release, this isn't really an issue at all because combining two mons approximates their average starting natures, but that's not how it worked before it arrived on our shores. Every monster, mixed bred or purebred, had an immutable starting nature. I talked about this before in another video, so I'm not going to get super into it, but this had a lot of bizarre implications, meaning only certain subbreeds could get certain techs. I don't like that. DX changes how combination works sorta, but it's significantly more in line with Monster Farm 2 than Monster Rancher 2. So luckily, there's a few specific Phoenix spawns with a low enough nature to get Flame Cannon. You can find these on legendcup.com. Now, that's a lot of work for one tech. A Withering tech, no less. So is it worth it? Well, a chance to wither 50% more than it costs for almost C-Force is pretty okay if you ask me. Again, it has all the same benefits of its predecessors, but it sits in a slot with every other tech we've talked about so far. 30 cost isn't much, but on a 14 guts rate, it's pretty expensive. Is what I would say if DX didn't introduce two other Phoenixes with lower starting natures and faster guts rates. The fastest purebred Phoenix is now 11, which does a lot to make the Flame Shot line significantly stronger, with the downside of not being able to get grit on this specific breed. Once again, it ends up being a pretty big decision about whether or not to get them, as it fundamentally changes how your monster will play. Not that that's necessarily a bad thing. Heat Beam does big bastard damage for 46 force for less than 30 guts, but it is comically inaccurate at -13. This is like Golem level accuracy for a heavy tech, but it's more costly. You get less out of it. In the base game, this made it significantly outclassed by the next two techs we're going to talk about, but on 11 guts rate, and if it hits you don't have to worry about grading anyway, well, all of a sudden it's looking like it's time to swing some beams. And yet, it's not. It's still outclassed. Fire Stream is not the most efficient use of 45 guts, but almost A force and a hit rate above the waterline makes it reliable, if not, expensive. This is a consistent round opener as long as you're willing to fight your way out of a guts hole. That is an unpleasant phrase. I don't know if I'm ever going to use that again. Heat Beam may be a bastard tech, but if you really want to be a guts hole, then Fire Wave is the play. Fire Wave is like Gelcopter that trades some hit percent to Wither more, which, it's not really a good trade, but it makes Phoenix terrifying to fight on the first frame of a match. Enough damage to put a dent into tanks and enough accuracy to make the entire match into a coin flip versus speed monsters, except if it comes up tail feathers you don't immediately lose. You'll just probably lose a bit later. So there are Phoenix's 6 intelligence techs. Not a lot, but it's double as power techs, which I guess we gotta talk about. Talons is a basic tech. It has 15 force and 5 hit for 11 guts. This chicken's got hands. Is this the best basic tech in the game? It might be. Great damage and hit for almost no cost? How could you possibly top that? This is insane. Get Talons out of here. All my homies hate Talons. This is the best tech in the game. This is the tip of the top of the tip of the top tier, and it is such an insanely strong tech for its cost that it almost single-handedly makes a case for Power Phoenix being stronger than Intelligence Phoenix. Almost. What really makes a case for Power Phoenix being better than Intelligence Phoenix is Rapid Beaks. 23 cost for 25 force and plus 10 hit. What do you say about this? It's good as hell. That's it. If you're gonna drug your Phoenix to get past the E gain and power, you might as well pick up its one extra power tech from Errantry. Especially considering, it's really good. The Power Phoenix build is solved. Just get the one tech. It wasn't a hard mystery to solve, but it's solved, so that's something. Remember that bit about how Phoenix's potential is locked behind bizarre restrictions? Well, if you thought the power techs were the answer, you're wrong and very stupid, but thanks for playing. No, the real hidden potential for Phoenix hides in being among the best mixed attackers in the game, with an argument to be made for it being the absolute pinnacle. The lightweight tournament class allows for mixed attackers to thrive in an otherwise low stat cap meta, and I had to eventually ban Blue Phoenix because it's so good, what with its 9 guts rate and all. Yeah, I buried the lead a little bit back here, but Blue Phoenix in DX has a guts rate of 9. Phoenix's techs are balanced with a slow maximum guts rate of Mind, and due to this, they're undeniably powerful. Well, some are. Some are pretty deniable. But just how much of a jump is it from 14 to 9? Well, it's the equivalent of permanently having Anger active without the dodge penalty. It's a steep climb. Blue Phoenix didn't really need this, and it ends up giving it the unique distinction of being the best sub of its breed, even despite it not being able to learn Grit, as long as you're not planning a pure power build. Every blue Phoenix spawns with an intelligence tech, which isn't a bad thing, but it does mean that the best Phoenix for power builds does end up being the purebred. Having guts build slowly is always better than wasting guts on something that doesn't do anything for you. Blue Phoenix also starts with the Joker Battle Special Reel, which boosts your offenses and defenses when your opponent is low on life, but then if it runs out and you don't finish them off, it reverses those. It leaves you a sitting duck. Chicken. Chicken was right there. I should have said chicken. Reel's a mixed bag, but considering you don't have grit, you're probably just trying to get the fight over with as fast as possible anyway. Phoenix's set of pretty damaging but not instantly game-ending threats are now all of a sudden just that. Just hope that Reel doesn't proc after they survive a frame 1 fire wave, or else it's going to be a long, arduous march to the grave as you try to get off your second attack. So the power build is obvious, but the Intelligence Phoenix has a lot more options considering how few techs it actually has. Twister vs Flameshot is the main one, with the former being pretty good overall pick, and the latter only really shining on Blue Phoenix, but being pretty serviceable otherwise. Heat Beam vs Fire Wave is also a choice that needs to be made, but really only in lightweight, where monsters running no speed is common. Heat Beam gives you a good anti-tank counter pick, but Fire Wave is ready for anything, as long as you have the guts to spend. There's a real issue with trying to make pure Intelligence Phoenix function though, as its basics take up the front 2 slots and it has no way to cover them up. Intelligence Phoenix ends up being pretty rare, even though it's got a couple of good options. For mixed attackers, you have those same decisions to make as Intelligence Phoenix, but you've also got Rapid Beaks to help you out with consistency, so it makes the gambling a bit easier to stomach. You got the world's strongest contingency plan in your back pocket. Phoenix is very strong, but its Firebird thematics are hamstringed by having to play a certain way. Tournaments with tech removal are starting to pop up, meaning the ability to get rid of its or any other monster's basic techs is becoming a more popular way to play. This has always been possible, and before DX released it was actually the norm, but I decided against running events like this because it sidelines Switch players who don't have access to Cheat Engine. A few tournament organizers like Macho Cheese are selflessly recreating competitor entries from Switch players through cheats. So basically, they send him screenshots, he looks at it, and then he rebuilds the monster in Cheat Engine. But I don't think this is realistic to expect from all tournament organizers. This is above and beyond, this is not the norm. Either way, there's now more ways to compete in Monster Entry than ever. New formats keep popping up and more players are beginning to host their own tournaments. It's a great time to get involved in the scene. But my tangent aside, Intelligence Phoenix is more viable in these tech removal formats, with Power and Mixed Attacker Phoenix being significantly better in DX proper and the DX Battle League that I run. Phoenix has a power level worthy of its anime incarnation. Sorta, at least. Which isn't something you can say about many of the monsters. It may not be Old One powerful, but not even Metal Nurse Old One powerful, and the bird does not stand a chance against the funny alien. It's the legend you've heard of, and for good reason. Its power isn't unspeakable. It's pretty speakable. That's really good. There. Spoke. And if you want to hear me say some other stuff that's pretty speakable, consider following the channel, hanging out in my Discord, or supporting the Patreon. These wonderful people you see here on screen help keep the channel going even when I'm busy with other stuff, which seems like pretty often these days. I couldn't do it without them. If you want to play or watch competitive Monster Rancher, Season 3 of the DXBL is starting up very soon. The last 2 seasons have been great, and this one's shaping up to be the best one yet. We got some fun gimmicks this year, and hopefully we'll see a few Phoenixes. I'm sure we'll see Blue Phoenix, because I unbanned a lot of stuff, but yeah. Thanks for watching.